Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today, a phenomenal woman that I had the pleasure of actually recently connecting with online a little bit over a month ago. Got a chance to capture a little bit of snippet of her story, and I knew pretty much right away that this was somebody that I wanted to have an opportunity to bring on the show. We connected, we communicated, and she graciously accepted the invitation to do so. She is a wellness leader. She is a published author. She is a retired military vet. She's a keynote speaker, but most importantly, she's a woman of God. And she's taken time out of a very busy schedule to hang out with us for a little while, to share a little bit of her story, her journey, with the hopes of inspiring and encouraging and uplifting us, particularly when it comes to dealing with the storms of life, the adversities of life, and how to properly approach those things and utilize those moments for growth and strength and development of ourselves and our character and our mindsets. So it is my privilege and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you our guest this evening, Miss Shameria Ann Davis. Shameria, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get started, getting into our segments for the evening, I do want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, a little kind of general intro, if you will, who you are, where you're from, what you do, kind of give our listeners a taste of who is Shameria Ann Davis.
Well, I am say a little old woman from Texas. I grew up in Texas. I've been here majority of my life, other than moving around with the military. I joined the military at a very young age, at 17. I kind of always had my head on my shoulders. I can't take credit for it. It's just something God had planned for me in my life, and I just kind of followed the path and spent my 20 years, and I was ready to get out. I had small children, and I wanted to be a little bit more available for them. And so I got out of the military. But throughout my life, I've always been kind of nestled into leadership positions and put in some places that I was unfamiliar with. And God had a way of trying to prune me through those things. So I've just had a really good time growing in my career and growing in my spirituality, and then growing as a mother. And so my life has taken a lot of turns, but here I am.
Awesome. Awesome. Great to hear that. Great to hear that. And again, we're going to get to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm excited about that. And I know my listeners are as well. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this thing. And as we do so, as I say all the time, I'm a firm believer, that when it comes to telling our stories, reflecting back on our journeys, we would be remiss if we don't take a moment to set aside and just kind of go back to the very beginning. To try to see where the foundational basis of our story begins and begin to kind of connect the dots, if you will, kind of put the pieces together as to what was going on in the beginning and how does that parlay into what is happening right now in our day-to-day life. So with that said, if you would, let's go back, kind of take us back to the beginnings, your childhood, if you will, and share with us, what was it like for you growing up? Fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there's any particular challenges that come to mind that you'd like to share as well, you can do that, again, to give us that foundational basis of where your story begins.
Right. I grew up in a home with my mother, primarily as a single mother, pretty much my whole life. Her and my father were married before I was born, and maybe a couple months into my life, and they divorced around the time that I was 2. So I was raised with my mother and 3 older brothers. So I was the baby girl of all brothers. I'm the baby girl of my grandmother's grandchildren. I'm the baby girl all over. So a little bit of spoiled, just a little bit, but grew up kind of in a household where my mother is not the most girly, if you will. She has some qualities, but she's not the most girly. So growing up in the house with my mother and my brothers, I was really, really quiet. I grew up in a family full of extroverted people. I'm extra introverted. So I spent a lot of time observing and watching people, kind of learning what I didn't want to go through in life, what I didn't want to do. So I was more focused as a kid on what I didn't want as opposed to what I did want. Growing up in inner city Dallas can be very, very hard, can be a lot going on. I had brothers in and out of jail. My father was in and out of prison. And my mother, spent some time in and out of domestic relationships, same as my grandmother. So it was kind of a trend to kind of see that thing and know that I didn't want that in my life. And so it was a beautiful childhood, other than, the little drama here and there. But I can say the one thing in my household that I can reflect on and know carried me forward is love. There's a deep level of love in my household, and my mother is a person who loves through some of the things that I don't think myself that I could love through. My mother's just a very devotional kind of mother, despite the non girliness about her. So a lot of the memories I have would just be, bonding things with our family, our matriarch, and my great grandmother was alive a really long time, and our families would connect every like probably multiple times a month. And we would always get together around holidays. We had a whole family secret Santa. We would draw names. So we just had a very loving family with all the chaos around us. The one thing that was solid was love. And so that kind of gave me a foundation of understanding, that's a Christian love. That's a Christ kind of love. That's a love that you can't, it starts at home and it's going to stay with you as long as you know it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate your transparency and sharing, the beginnings of your story here. I think the thing that stands out to me, a couple of things, of course, that stands out to me, of course, right off is the presence of, as you said, emphasized multiple times, the love that existed in the home. There's something about having a loving bond amongst your family, even in the midst of, things that may have been viewed as being chaotic or troublesome or whatever.
Hmm.
As you stated, having that love, a love that is reflective of godly love, um, can help you to withstand those storms, those challenges. It kind of keeps things together, even when on the outside it may look like it's kind of falling apart in a number of
Right.
different ways. And then the other thing I think that stands out to me is the fact that you spoke about being an extreme, introvert. And so and the idea that you were, as an extreme introvert, which is not necessarily uncommon when you're introvert, is that you do a lot of, because you're not talking, you're doing a lot of
Hmm.
observing, you're kind of checking things
Hmm.
out. And I like the fact that you talked about how you were processing during those times, like, not I wasn't just looking because I didn't have anything to say. I'm processing in the sense of saying to myself, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, kind of figuring it out. And as I think about what you do today, and you may not have, of course, been marinating on that at the time as a kid, but again,
Hmm.
this is where I talk about the connecting of the dots and trying to see, already in my childhood years, I was already being prepared, if you will.
Yep.
God was allowing you to go through those experiences in preparation for the purpose that you currently walk in your adult life today. Again, we
Yep.
don't always understand what's going on at the time. You wish things were different, but there was really no mistake or accident by it. You needed to be an observer of it so you would know how to properly process and in this case, of course, be able to help others, later in life, that you would be in position to help
Right.
others to work through those same type of things, to have the right mindset, the right approach, and things like that. So that's what I find really intriguing about your intro, if you will, of what life was like as a childhood and how that all connects to your purpose. So great stuff. And again, appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that. Um, yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
So, as you know, of course, we go through our childhood. We might experience some things like you shared. You know, uh, but as we get into adulthood, the experiences don't change. In fact, they expand. We get to experience more things. We meet new people, some good, some not so good. We encounter new storms, some that
Hmm.
are kind of the regular day to day type stuff. But every now and then, we of course will begin to encounter storms that are a little bit more intense, a little bit more heavier, a little bit more burdensome. So much so that, and I think this is, reflective of anybody in life, is that you live long enough, you're going to get hit with that storm every now and then, that you are asking yourself, how am I going to get through this? This
Yeah.
is something that, I can't throw money at to make it go away. I can't call in a favor to make it go away. This is something that's a little bit deeper, for me. I'm worried. I'm anxious. I got fears. Even as a believer, you might be even questioning God, like, why did you let me, have to deal with this, and how do you expect me on my own merits and my own condition to be able to work through this? How am I supposed to recover? And so, with that said, if you would share with us a time where you felt just like that you got hit with this storm, didn't know what to do, didn't know how you were going to navigate through it, how it was going to all work out? Obviously, you're here today, so we can trust and believe that God made a way, but maybe at that time you didn't quite see that. You didn't know how it was going to happen. So if you would, whatever that story is that you're going to share with us now, kind of walk us through what that experience was like for you and what was ultimately the turning point where you began to kind of see some light at the end of the tunnel and coming up out of that situation.
Honestly, it's probably two or three situations I could name that kind of trail one. The first is my decision to go into the military because I was 15 and I knew I wanted to go. My uncle, one of my aunt's husband, was in the military. At that time, he might have already been a sergeant major. And but he was only military in our entire family and not a blood relation. So I didn't necessarily grow up under him and know what to do. But I knew I wanted to go when I was a small kid. He taught me military time and all kind of stuff. And I would go and play with his uniforms and go and play with all kind of things. But I was the only kid in the family who was interested in that. And obviously I told you, I'm like the baby girl. There's only four girls to start with. So they're like, of all the kids in the family, you know, the baby girl. And I'm like, yeah, it's what I want to do. So trying to get into the military was very, very tough for me because I'm a very small woman. So I'm 5'2". And I was born with a hearing loss in my left ear. And I was also born with a curved spine, which is scoliosis. And so I had both of those issues from birth. And there's waiverable numbers for that to get into the military. And then if you don't hit those numbers, then you can't get in. So the first obstacle was the hearing exam. And I failed it a number of times. And I prayed about it and I talked to God about it. And I went in one day and I don't know what was going on with the computers because I know good and well the numbers that came through were not my numbers, but that's the numbers that they took. And so I passed that part. To this day, they never even made me test again, which is crazy, right? And so, but I was able to get in without having to be wavered for my hearing at all because of whatever was going on that particular day when I went and did my test. So that was the grace of God, honestly. The second thing was because of my spine. It's not something that necessarily I even knew at that time. My mother knew that I was born with a curved spine, but I had no idea. So when I went in to do these exams and they ended up making me go into a next step. And so you have to leave the recruitment station and stuff like that. And you have to go and see a specialist and they do all kind of x-rays. And I was literally 1 degree unwaverable. I was 1 degree away from being unwaverable for that particular spine. So they were telling me, you know, at the time I was 16, they were like, if you had waited until you were older, your spine continues to curve as you age. And so the curvature would have been too much if I had waited any longer than I had already waited. And I took my ASVAB at 15 because I was ready. And so I was able to get in with that waiver of my spine with that 1 degree differential. And so they had already told me, once you get into the military, this thing is going to get worse and you'll be injured at some point because, you know, curved spine just doesn't reverse itself and it doesn't stop curving because you're still growing. I was only 16. So that situation, I'm saying it quickly, but that was months and months and months. I started the process young. You can't sign your contract until you're 17, but I was already 17. By the time I signed my contract, I had been 17 for a while. Whereas if I hadn't had to go through that, I would have been able to sign it on my birthday. And so it took a few months. And so that was a very frustrating process because I had already mapped out kind of my life at 16, believe it or not. And I knew what I wanted to do. I knew where I wanted to go to school and I knew how I was going to pay for it, which was that process. And so that took forever. The second thing was really just trying to navigate college coming from a family as a first generation college student was very, very difficult because, you know, you don't have anybody to turn to ask the questions you need to ask. And I went on a major campus. I went to the University of Houston, which is a student population of a good 40,000. Now it's much, much higher than that. But at the time it was about 40,000 people. And they make you live on campus the first year. And so throughout that process of college, I got through 5 years with 2 degrees, but it was very, very hard because I've always had academics under my belt, but everything else I did not. So I really was learning every single step of the way, trying to figure out majors and financially just trying to make it work out. And during during college, my mother had an episode where she ended up having to go into a hospital. And then at one point, she had to move where I was in college. I was working through college and taking care of my mother. And then my brother had an issue with his son, and I was then raising my nephew. So I was 21 years old trying to take care of my mother and my nephew and get through school. But I managed to get it all done, but it didn't come without a lot of prayer and not living a typical, 21, 22-year old college lifestyle. That just didn't happen for me. But it's okay because, he sets you apart, and I was okay with that. But it was a struggle.
Wow. Wow. Again, appreciate your transparency and sharing that. So you're doing all this. You got school, you got military, you got taking care of kids that don't
Yeah.
belong to you. You got mama you
Right.
taking care of,
Right.
and you don't have a support network. Not
Nope.
because people didn't love you, but because they just didn't have
No.
the
They
the
weren't there either.
experience. They when they weren't
Yes.
physically there, so it's just
Yep.
kind of you against the world, so to speak, trying to navigate and figure
Yeah.
that thing out. So I can only
It was a
imagine
lot.
how overwhelming that must have been. But at the same time, I appreciate your perseverance, your resiliency. That even in the midst of the storm, even in the midst of the adversity, because with everything you shared, you had every reason from a worldly perspective to be like, you know what, maybe I
To
just
just
need
say,
to just let this go and do something
right.
different. It would have been an easy decision to make. It would have been an easy out, with all that you were dealing with. So the fact that you stuck in there, you toughed it out, you fought through the challenges of it all, and of course leaning into your faith along the way. That speaks volumes to not only who you are, your character as well, but just understanding, the power of God and how, as you stated, some of the things that you shared happened. Those things were not supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to pass these tests. You weren't
Right.
supposed to be in the position that you were in. But when these things happen, and you say to yourself, "What? Then how did it work out?" The world would say that you were lucky, but as
Right.
a
But I know
believer,
better.
as you're right, being one who has a relationship with God, you understand that luck had nothing to do with it. That this was all about God. This was all about His positioning you again, because there was a plan, there was a purpose, there was a walk that you were supposed to go on that started from childhood, transitioned into early adulthood, because again, there was a purpose laid ahead of you that you were supposed to walk into, that you were supposed to do. These steps had to occur, they had to take place.
Yeah.
And this is why I like this part of the podcast is, when we talk about these moments where it feels like there's no way, that it's impossible, that it's insurmountable. We know, for those of us who have a relationship with God and understand who He is, we know He's the ultimate problem solver, the ultimate way maker. So there really is no, I can't get through this, that there's no way. It's more about, are we going to be obedient, and are we going to have faith and trusting in Him to work that thing out for us, as you clearly did in your situation. And it's the reason why you were able to get through it, and be where you are in your walk today. So definitely appreciate that. And I know somebody hearing that, tuning into this is going to be blessed by that. Because again, these are not lucky moments. These are not
Yeah.
happenstance. There's nothing random about it. This is God at work, and this is how He
Mhm.
does it. This is how He moves. It's one of those, if you know, you know. And
Mhm.
so, and we're trying to tell you, if you don't know, you need to catch on real quick. Keep
Right.
listening, because we're not making this stuff up. It's just not magical. It's not pixie dust in the air. This is the real deal, and this is how God is, and this is how God loves. So awesome, and you sharing that. I appreciate that. So I'm curious to know, when you do find yourself facing moments of adversity, challenge. I mean, obviously you've shared some things, that were pretty challenging, but we know that sometimes it's intense and heavy like that, and then sometimes it's just day to day life stuff. But nevertheless, we all face adversity, we all face storms. But I'm curious to know from you, when you do find yourself in such moments, what is it that you like to do that kind of works best for you when it, hey, today I'm facing a moment of adversity, a challenge has come before me. What does that process look like, that routine look like for you, that you like to do, that helps you to, in a healthy and a productive way, work through those moments of adversity, work through those challenges in life, and be able to come up with an appropriate, solution to it, appropriate response, if you will, in going through that moment of adversity?
Yeah, I mean, I have, this will be a little unorthodox, but I'm going to actually read one of the poems from the book that I wrote because it is It's one of the things that I do when I am, feet against the wall, back against the wall, and just, like I have no idea what to do next. You have to find a way to pray about it and then give it to him and then wait. But in the waiting, I'm not really a sit still and wait kind of person. So it's not necessarily that I try to do his work for me, but I try to use my thought processes to like bring me back to reality. So I, thinking about the situation, with my mother and my nephew and things like that. And I say, okay, the situation is coming to me because God has entrusted me, obviously, to know that I can do something, because the minute something said to me in my heart, I know it's something I can do. But I already know I have 5 other things on my plate too, but I still feel like I can do it. So I know that at that point, I'm just waiting for him to give me the provision to get done what it is, that I already know that I can do. And so I wrote a poem in this book called Just Pray and Wait. And it really speaks to like my thought processes. Have you ever seen God move quickly? Honestly, actually, I have. I've seen him answer prayers swiftly. I've seen him validate experiences yet past. Intentionally, I asked after much suffering. Really, it didn't take that long. I cried out to God, why is this happening? Answers came after I truly asked. God, why are you letting this happen to me? Knowing God's glory required letting go of my story. Looking around, I saw no one else wondering. Faith without works is indeed dead. I looked around and no conviction seemed evident to me. He wants to bless you, keep you, and shine his face upon you. So I fasted and prayed to see his glory. Evil will conspire to pull those blessed roots. I know he moves with undeserved favor. His promise is everlasting. Just pray and wait. God will show you his glory and clear the way, no matter the tribulations spread upon your plate. That's one of the poems I wrote because you have to find in the middle of the issues that you're facing, is he listening? Am I waiting? Because we know he doesn't answer in our time. And we know that certain things that we go through, you're not going to be able to, in your human mind and way of thinking, figure it out. 9 times out of 10, he has it already figured out for you, but we're being impatient. So I find myself all the time saying, okay, I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to give it to God, and I'm going to wait to see what he sets on my heart or how he speaks to you in whatever way that looks like. And they tell you all the time, find your secret place where you talk to God. And I can honestly tell you, I didn't always go into my secret place, but I was patient. And he came to me where I was to let me know what I needed to do. So that random person that walks up to you that you don't know, that gives you information you didn't ask for, that's God. That random information that you get, I can tell you a story. My freshman year of college, I left home in my car with only enough gas to get me from Dallas to Houston to campus. I had no dorm because, again, I told you I was a first generation college student. So no one in my family knew about housing or what to do. Dorms was like a foreign process to me. So I had no dorm room, no nothing. And I drive up there in my little Mazda 626 with my car full of my stuff with nowhere to go but to sleep in my car. And that was my plan. Sleep in your car until you figure out where you're going to live because you're going to school. Class starts next week. I get there and I see a friend and I talk to him and I say, hey, where is the admissions office, for financial aid and things like that. As I'm walking to the office for financial aid, I'm lost because University of Houston is huge, but I'm on the right path. I just don't know which building it is. So I stop a random girl and I say, hey, I'm looking for the financial aid office. She's an upperclassman. She says, okay, well, what do you need? And so I tell her what I need. She tells me exactly what to do to get what I need. She tells me how to get a book loan, which the university will get you until your financial aid drops. She tells me where to get my books so that I can get them without having money in my pocket before financial aid drops. And she teaches me how to get the refund. And then she tells me, oh, and I have a friend who didn't decide to come to college, and there is an open dorm room. I can tell you the room number. If you go to the office, they may be able to let you move into that dorm room. That was my dorm room. That's how I got into that dorm room. All of that because I got to that campus at the time that I got there and walked to that building at the time that I walked. You're never going to tell me that these things are coincidence. But I got in my car with faith, drove to that campus, and then said, okay, God, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to figure it out. And on the way, he was like, oh, you got faith. Okay, well, I got you. And that's how it goes. But, one foot in front of the other.
Love that. Love that. I think that was a perfectly great example of showing what it means to operate in obedience, operate in faith, and just trusting God to navigate what seems to be, like I said, like this hopeless mission, if you will. I mean, you knew you had to get to school, you knew you had classes coming up, you knew you didn't have a place to stay. We're already prepared, if
Hmm.
necessary, to stay in the car if you had to, because you would.
Yep.
I understand what the assignment is, and I'm going to make it happen one way or the other. And then, to meet somebody, because the first thing that was coming to my mind, that's what your story classified is, what I refer to as a blessings in the streets moment. That's exactly what
Hmm.
that is, where you encounter someone least expected. You didn't know them. They owed you
Yep.
no favor. They owed you no help or anything. There's many people that you could have run into, asked for help, and they could have
Yep.
either ignored you or gave you very minimal to no help at all. But yet you meet somebody and they don't just help you, they give you blow by blow, step by step, to the letter, even pretty much told you what room you're going to be in.
Yep.
And then it all manifests itself exactly in that manner. You didn't mention any hiccups along the way. You didn't mention, oh,
Nope.
I ran into this. They
Not one.
told me, I did, and I was in a room. Problem was fixed. How does that happen?
Right.
Can you say that that was luck? Can you say that that was random? Can you say that you just had somebody was just looking out for you? You probably could say that, but I can tell you who that somebody was, and that was
Right.
God looking out for you, because He knew that this is where you were supposed to be. He'd already set it up for you to be there. All
Hmm.
you needed to do was trust, and when you did that, because I like what you talked about earlier about how you said, that you understand the importance of waiting on God, because God's timing is not our timing, but you're also not the type of person who just sits still.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a problem, because that's not the same thing. You refusing to sit still is not the same thing as somebody trying to do God's work instead of letting
Right.
Him do His work. You just said, I'm gonna move in the direction that I just prayed on, and I'm
Hmm.
just going to trust that as I move in that direction, you're going to navigate me on where to go. If I'm supposed to go left,
Right.
you're going to tell me to go left, or you're going to allow me to encounter somebody that's going to tell me to go left. If it's right, they're going to tell me to go right. If it's up, it's down, wherever that is, you're going to make the way. So that's a boldness in your faith, and you just, again, moving forward. Even I gave it to God. I told Him what I needed, and I trusted that He was going to work it out. And I wasn't idle. I kept moving. I wasn't rushing anything, but I was just
Right.
moving forward, understanding that, trusting that He's going to tell me. And if He needed to tell you to stop, I think you would have been okay with that. But you were
Oh
trusting that
yeah.
He was going to tell you whatever it was that you needed to be told. And He did just that through what
Did.
was otherwise, again, from a worldly perspective, it was a perfect stranger. From a godly perspective, we might say, God sent you an angel to share
Yeah.
with you, to tell you exactly what you needed to do. So I love that story, and just not just how it turned out, but just, again, it's a representation of who God is and how He moves. And that's why, again, that's why our relationship with God is so significant, so valuable, so important. But just in general, in processing how you deal with stress and challenging moments and things of that nature, you're exactly right. You kind of have to kind of reflect on what's going on, take it up in prayer, and then have that patience to wait. If God is meaning for you to sit still, you've turned that prayer over to Him. You got to wait, if nothing more, to just hear what He has to say. Let him lead you.
Right.
Let Him guide you accordingly. And then and of course, and then trust that process, because sometimes God is going to tell us to do something that doesn't always feel good to us. It doesn't always make sense to us. It
Right.
doesn't seem logical to us, but we got to do it anyway. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter if He told you to hop on one leg and turn around 3 times. Well, if you know that He said do it, that
Uh-huh.
makes it okay. That doesn't that voids it out being silly or
Right.
insignificant or anything like that. He told me to do it. It must be a reason that He's telling me to do this. It must be a
Hmm.
reason that I was walking on this path. Technically, I was heading in the same direction, in the right direction, but I didn't know where I was going. And He made
Yep.
sure you were going to meet somebody along the way. So, beautiful story. I love that you shared that. Appreciate you sharing that, because, again, it just really drives home the point of what we're trying to let our listeners know through the sharing of your story, about, the value of that relationship with God, and why it's so necessary. So thank you for doing that.
Thank
Um,
you.
so Shameria, when you think back to all of your experiences that you've had in life, whether they be ups, downs, highs, lows, the challenges, the storms, and everything in between, um, if you had an opportunity to sit across from the younger version of you, if you could sit her down, the young lady who grew up an introvert, didn't have a lot to say, did a lot of observing, didn't necessarily had a loving family, but didn't have the support of a family, that mainly because they just didn't know how to support you. They
Hmm.
they they didn't have the experience to be able to support you. Knowing
Right.
what you know now, if you could speak to her, if you can impart some words of wisdom, some words of encouragement into the younger Shameria, or perhaps somebody that's listening to our episode and they're in a similar situation, they feel like God has placed something on their hearts for them to do, but they just kind of feel like they're by themselves. I don't know what to do. I don't really have that support system. I'm feeling lost, but I know that something is driving me to go into this direction, into this purpose that God has called me to do, but I'm just kind of lost and unsure how to properly navigate that thing. What would be your words of encouragement, your words of inspiration to those listeners, or to your younger version of yourself?
I would honestly say to myself or anyone else, keep pushing. If I could talk to my younger self, I'd be like, girl, you have no idea where he's taking you. You're not even going to be able to cook up where he's taking you. And the amount of things that I have accomplished at a young age, but also just been through and still saw the brighter side of things, and keep driving. I mean, he just constantly blows your mind. The scripture tells you running over. I don't even know that I knew what that really meant. And it's
Hmm.
still, if you keep on keeping on the way that he tells you to, and being obedient and following, and there is no perfection in your walk. You're always going to come to moments where you question, but you can't let that stop you at that moment. You don't sit down when you're questioning and just sit. You don't do that. So you just keep going, and let him show you where you're supposed to be going. And if you're walking in a direction and you don't know if it's the right direction, keep walking, because if it's the wrong direction, he will find a way to tell you that's not it. So I would just, I mean, keep on keeping on.
Mm. Love that. Love that. And I think I would add to that, because one of the things that, as you've been sharing your story, I never heard you mention about feeling sorry for yourself.
Oh
You
no.
never said, "Oh, I understand that I got a curved spine. I understand that I got hearing loss that I'm dealing with. I understand that that support system is not as strong as I would like it to be." But you never use that as an excuse. You never let that, to allow you to allow to creep into your life, that feeling of doubt, like as if I can't accomplish anything, I can't be what I'm supposed to be. It's almost like you always had a consistent understanding of your value and your worth, and even if you didn't know how it was going to play out, you just
Mhm.
knew that it was going to play out, it was going to work out. So kind of ties into
Yeah.
your message that you just said about, you just got to keep pressing on, you just got to keep pushing through, you just got to keep moving forward, because even if you can't see, even if it's not obvious, even if it's not right blatantly in front of you spelled out, you just got to trust that it's going to happen. And so I appreciate how God has taken this small frame, this 5'2" being with these these health flaws, if you will, these physical flaws, and blessed you, and anointed you in a way to allow you to do the work. He's made you bigger, even in the midst of these, what the world would say are these imperfections, what the world would see as being your roadblock from ever being able to do this, or ever being able to achieve that. I mean, I saw your information on your website. I mean, you were in the military for 20 years. How do you do that? You had a lot of time in service, a lot of time in doing
Mhm.
all these other things that to come alongside other people. That should have just broken you down physically and mentally and emotionally, and even spiritually, if we're being frank about it, that you just say,
Yeah.
hey, how much am I supposed to carry? And I'm trying to carry me by myself, and you throwing all of this on me. But it was
Mhm.
all in preparation. It was all a part of the process. And that's why I tell people all the time, and I'm even working on myself to embrace that more and more, is we cannot look at these storms as negative events. they are actually opportunities. And they're a positive thing. If God let that storm come your way, it was never to destroy you. It was never to take you out. It was never about being a negative impact on your life. It was destined to strengthen you, to make you a better version of who you are, so that He can use you accordingly, not only for advancement of His kingdom, but to do the works that He's placed in you to be of service. The very gifts that's been inside of you from day one. Uh, he wanted to make sure that those gifts were manifested, that they were brought to life. And I don't know if you paid attention to our title, for our show this
Mm-hmm.
evening. Life is a gift. Your
Yeah.
life was a gift from God, and he didn't just create you just to exist on Earth and take up
Right.
space and suck up some air and do nothing. We were all created that our lives are gifts. And the gifts are within us, and God intends for us to use those gifts to tap into them. And you've been doing just that. You've acknowledged that it hasn't always been easy. I'm sure there have been days when you wanted to, throw in the towel, but your strength has continued to build momentum through your relationship with God. And so and that's evident in the sharing of your story and just how things have worked themselves out over the years in your life. So again, appreciate you so much for sharing all this, because this is powerful and needed for you to share your story as you are, because so many of us out here are just going through and we don't know how to process. We don't know how to handle these things. And so seeing examples like yours, hearing examples, I should say, like yours, makes all the difference in the world. And it's going to be game changing, life changing for somebody that's going to tune in. So again, I thank you for sharing as you have, and so transparently in doing so. So with that said, Shameria, before I conclude everything with us this evening with our podcast episode, again, I thank you. I appreciate you. Your transparency, your authentic, nature in sharing as you have. I know I have been blessed. I know my listeners have been blessed, but as is customary here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, we would not let you get up out of here without taking an opportunity to love on you, to celebrate you, to acknowledge you, uplift you. So if you would please share with us if you got anything going on personally and or professionally that we need to know about now or coming up down the road. Let's put that out there. Let's find out. We want to know what's happening, because we already know from hearing your story that God's on your side, that He's got an anointing over you. I'm curious. I know my listeners are curious. What's going on that we need to be aware of, connected to? How can we support? How can we keep up with you and be a part of all that you got going on? Please share with us what's coming up for you.
So I'll start with the business. I am the owner of a consulting firm that does coaching for individuals and coaching for businesses. So I always do sort of a holiday party, and then I always host somewhat of a vision board kind of workshop with people. I do it virtually so that people can build, and all of the materials come with that. So I do have one coming up on December the 14th. It's a while from now. I just had one like maybe a month ago. And so I do have one of those coming up. And so I encourage anybody, if they're trying to, get to the next step and they feel like they've hit a wall, or if you're just trying to, plan out your vision and you want God to accompany you on that path because you haven't quite done it that way. It's a way for them to get done the things that they need to make that happen. And so that's one. Um, I have the ability for everybody to connect with me on my website, which is www.shameriaann.com. Pretty much anything and everything that I'm doing, you can get on that website and find. If you're trying to get to Instagram, if you're trying to get to Facebook, if you're trying to get to X, if you're trying to get to LinkedIn, if you're trying to get to Twitter, whatever you're trying to get to for me to be able to follow along. I do TikToks every now and then, but I'm not too fancy with with the dancing. But love to connect with anybody in those atmospheres if they're trying to build a business or if they're just wanting somebody that can sit and coach them through their information. And so I always try to have myself as a resource. And then the last thing is I just released this book this month, and there's a workbook that accompanies it, which is the book that I read from. This is the one that I read from. So there's a workbook that accompanies it. And pretty much it is books of Christian poetry, but they're not fictional. They are 100% nonfiction, and they're stories of my life. So some of the stories that I've talked about, some of the experiences with my mother, or just my life in general, are in those poems. I've been writing since I was about 14. It was an outlet that I found with one of my high school teachers who was very impressed, but I wasn't in honors classes. And she was not happy about that. And she was like, "You're getting in honors classes," and made me take all these tests. But she was the one who encouraged me to write. And so I've been writing since that age. So that's what inspired those books. And so if you have someone you know that needs a little bit of encouragement or wants some spiritual guidance or a way to work out their own things, there's some tools in those books to teach them to write poetry as well. And the artist that does all of my artwork, there's some pages in there for them to color and kind of work through how God works in them and moves with their spiritual gifts. So, in a nutshell, that's me.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. Now you did leave something out that I'm aware of that you got coming up. I don't know if you have an official date, but last time I checked, somebody just recently got engaged. If I
I
memory serves me
did.
correctly, somebody put a ring on it, and so I don't know if you set a date yet or not, but that's definitely
Yes.
something to celebrate as well. So,
Yes.
um, congratulations to you on that. I don't
Thank
know if
you.
again, I don't know if you all have set a date just yet or not, but I did peep that.
It is
You know,
early next year. Yes, it is early next year. We haven't confirmed everything, but it will be in 2025. I will be getting married to an amazing human being who is, equally as passionate as I am and driven and godly centered above all things, as a man of God and as a father. So he's pretty awesome.
Awesome, awesome. And you had an opportunity to attend a very historical event just
I
recently as
did. I
well.
did. I did.
I know a few of your sisters who were present at that event as well. I grew up in Chicago, but before I moved to Dallas, I lived 17 plus years. I lived in Indianapolis, so I'm very familiar with the city. And it was a little on and popping just
It
recently
was.
for some things that were going on that many of us have seen, I'm sure, on the news that you were present
Yes,
for. So
I
I'm sure that was a
was.
memorable experience as well,
It
to
was
be a part of
amazing to
that.
be
So
in the midst of all of the amazingness of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. We had a wonderful time in Indianapolis.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Shameria, again, thank you so much for sharing your story, for accepting the invite to be a guest. Your participation in this has far exceeded my expectations. I was already expecting it to be good, and it was that and then some. So, thank you
Thank you.
so much. Again, I've been blessed. My listeners have been blessed. That's what this is all about. And I'm so appreciative and thankful for the fact that God again navigated a way for us to connect, and so, so now we family as far as I'm concerned. So you're welcome to come back on the show anytime. It has been a pleasure hanging out with you and hearing your story. And to my listeners, if you've enjoyed our content for this evening, hearing Shamaria's story, understanding or getting a better understanding of what it's all about and what it means to be in relationship with God and how He moves in our lives and how He loves us. So please subscribe, please share, please comment, please like, because this is what it's all about at the Blessings in the Streets podcast. We want to inspire, we want to encourage, we want to uplift, doing it in the most realist and rawest way, being transparent, being vulnerable, just pouring out our stories because everybody has a story to tell. We may not always understand that, we may not always realize it, but we all have stories to tell. We're all going through.
Yeah.
We all have storms, we all have uphill battles, but we also have a God that loves us unconditionally, wants nothing but the best for us, and He wants to be there for us. We just have to be willing to accept that and receive Him and want to commit to being in a relationship with Him. And if that's something that you haven't done up to this point in your life, today would be a great day for you to make that decision. And I can promise you, and I'm sure Shameria will co-sign on that and saying it'll be the best decision that you ever
Yes,
make.
sir.
So, please keep that in mind, not just for the adversity moments, but just in life in general, because He can step in and work things in magnificent and miraculous ways in all aspects of your life. So, with that said, remember here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, you keep pressing through, keep fighting that good fight, keep leaning into God, following His guidance, following His direction, trusting in Him, having that faith, moving forward, and even in the midst of that storm, knowing that He's with you all along the way. Through it all, He will take you through that storm, get you up out of that storm, and have you still standing upright, stronger, better, and wiser than what you were before that storm even hit. He loves us just that much and wants nothing but the best for us. So until next time, you take care of yourselves. I've enjoyed having you aboard with me and my guest this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time around.